Professors and university employees of Reddit. What behind the scenes campus drama went on that students never knew about? 2 professors arrested for meth production. One for murdering his wife with lab supplies. Another stepped down quietly for embezzlement. And that's how we replaced half our chemistry department in a year. A professor was hired to start a research center institute, got paid a lot of money and came in with tenure. He was weird to begin with, but as time went on it became apparent that he wasted all the funds intended for starting the center. Nothing was happening but the accounts were diminishing. The whistleblower hotline was provided with a bunch of data that strongly suggested he was funneling a lot of that money to a company owned in part by his brother, in addition to a lot of blatant and casual misuse of funds. Buying personal and convenient stuff for himself and staff. Things started heating up and they called him in for a hearing about it. The very next day we found an indignant letter announcing his resignation and accusing the entire department and college of unethical behavior slipped under the door. He skipped out in the middle of the night leaving a big pile of deliberately damaged equipment in his office. The university didn't pursue him. I believe it was because they were in the middle of a scandal involving faculty and students in another department and just didn't want to hear about it. Students were completely unaware. I knew a guy who was well liked and respected, and had several $1 million grants that he was overseeing. He was well known in the international community and everyone treated him as an expert in his field. He'd been working in the field for a couple of decades. Then he stopped coming to conferences. Turns out, he had faked all of his credentials. He hadn't even graduated from high school. Apparently lying about degrees is a huge no when it comes to grant funding. And the school he was working for lost all of the grants in his name. It was sad to hear about it since he had done such great work and fooled pretty much everyone because he was so knowledgeable. In our chemistry department a few years back, a grad student who was failing started poisoning another graduate student they worked with closely by putting carcinogens in their foods and drinks. Colorless, odorless, flavorless. Thanks to his chemistry knowledge, he was eventually caught and I'm not sure what happened to him. Thrown out for sure, perhaps arrested. Another year a grad student pushed another student down a flight of steps to try to kill them. Chemists are crazy. I was a professorial assistant to the Italian department and one of my favorite professors did a showing of a very famous Italian film Swept Away on a weekend. This was an outside of class activity, which no one was required to attend, at a college with college-age students. Just we don't have time to watch this in class, so we'll watch it over the weekend in the auditorium. The movie in question would be considered controversial by American standards, but Italian film standards it is also controversial, but considered a pretty important film for anyone studying film. It deals with some pretty intense issues involving dynamics between men and women, wealthy and poor as well as, depending on your interpretation, a rape scene. I was working in the department when we did this movie showing and so I got a front row view of it blowing up. Apparently some freshmen, who are 18 years old, attended the screening and complained to their parents, who complained to the school. The school decided the best option was to fire my professor. The Italian department went to bat for him, reminding the school that adult students attended the screening voluntarily. The school knew they couldn't get away with firing him specifically for that, so at the end of the quarter they revoked his contract renewal. He was supposed to come back the next year, for lifestyle choices that conflict with university standards. Dumb move. I don't know who on the university's legal team wrote it that way, but they should be fired. The professor in question was Pakistani and openly gay, living with his husband. As far as I understand it, he took their cases to court for discriminatory dismissal. They settled out of court for an unknown sum, but it was enough that my professor and his husband moved out to Italy where he now works at a university there and is very happy. No one outside of the Italian department knew what happened. Professor was the one caught and gone the next with no warning whatsoever. Currently it's at head of one of our research institutes and few of his colleagues somehow award themselves about $1 million each as a bonus. In my country it takes about 70 years of work on AVG salary to get that money. Also the same prof possibly forged some data in paper 10 years ago. Who knows how it's gonna end, but sure more dirt is being pulled on other PPL as well. My husband works in IT at our university student employment. A few days ago he got a call asking if anyone in the office had a lot of experience with this certain program. Turns out the person calling accidentally deleted 82 virtual machines containing close to 10 years of research and data. He worked for a small department and they didn't have any backups of the data. Not sure what happened since my husband transferred him to a data specialist. Married to an adjunct at a community college. There's an incredible amount of politics, like, you can't even fathom it, regarding full-time and adjuncts. It's like a best friends club to get full-time or tenure that is almost entirely impossible to get into unless invited. My wife is constantly working, taking more classes than she should be allowed to as an adjunct because they need her. She's course qualified to teach classes that very few other professors are, and is incessantly being given extra duties. Work with this group of full-timers to put together the symposium, etc. Her profile on Teacher is ridiculously good, as are her scores on the anonymous surveys they have every student take. She goes above and beyond at every turn to make sure her students have every opportunity to succeed, and I can tell you without a moment of doubt that she will literally never become a full-time professor at this college, and it is exclusively because of the clique that starts at the top and trickles down. Might not sound dramatic, nor make for a good post, but she's one of countless adjuncts at countless schools that are going through exactly the same thing. You mean, aside from the normal infighting between factions, character assassination carried out in formal language at review promotion tenure committee meetings, grad student poaching, running crime to a dean, etc.? Our heads of department or course directors would purposely keep dragging students, the act of pulling a student through their studies, even though they'd fail most classes. They'd purposely grade the student just above a pass even though the content of work was astonishingly bad, because if they left or dropped out it'd look bad on the course's stats and dropout rate. Not to mention the university not getting the student loan money. From there, of course, statistics would be ridiculously high for that particular degree, so they'd then sell this to prospective students and parents. This is currently still going on. Source: I'm a lecturer at a university and yes, it disgusts me. I worked as a janitor for a long time at a major university. If the kitchen staff was short, my 15-year-old, no experience Agnes was making your pizza. I was also once told on short notice to go grill cheeseburgers for an event. I figured it would be easy enough. I've used a grill before. I was left unsupervised to make food for 100 plus people. I have never faked my way through something that crazy with the exception of losing my virginity. I think students would be surprised just how much drama happens. I am talking everything from major drama like lawsuits that universities have kept quiet, or EO complaints to colleagues getting at each other because one thought the other one rolled her eyes at the other one. I just went to a faculty meeting that was so tense and angry that I legitimately wanted to leave the room, and it was over a small wording difference of opinion in a policy that literally does not matter because it is departmental and not university wide, so it's going to get struck down anyway. Anyway, sometimes I am happy to go to class or meet with students in my office because that is the fun part of the job, and usually drama free until the last week of classes when everyone starts hustling for a higher grade. Professor came to a student house party and started doing heroin. Nobody ratted on him. Professor was hired in our department. He was a bit socially awkward. Claimed he could only teach on certain days of the week. Never came to meetings, etc. But that's not super out of place, as I work in engineering and a lot of engineers are socially awkward and or entitled and expect other people to make their schedules around them. Flash forward a year, and we get a call from a university in another country asking if we have Professor X on our faculty list. Turns out he also held a faculty position there and was constantly going back and forth between institutions and countries, and no one knew about it. Guess it pulling $100 K plus per job makes the headache and sneakery worth it. My pie professor for grad school had his lab raided by the FBI. This happened long before I joined. Apparently, one of his first or second class of grad students in the 80s 90s decided that they wanted to use lab resources to brew some meth. Very easy to do with the equipment we have. From what I am told, this student would stay late in lab after others had left to get this done. In Breaking Bad style, he fences his drugs to some distributor and thought that was the end of it. The purity of his drugs was enough that they were able to trace it back from the streets to him in the lab. A sting operation shut down the lab while the dust settled, and my professor was cleared of all wrongdoing, since none of this was under his direct control, and all campus resources were being misused by the student. State Intelligence Bureau told the professor that it was the largest and purest operation they had seen in the state at this time. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to be entered into our iMac giveaway.